Welcome back to the show, everybody. Check out these headlines. BRICS is not ambushing the United States. A dismantling of the petrodollar by design. Is the U.S. involved? We've got that and so much more. Somebody roll that beautiful intro.
Digital Perspectives with Brad Kimes. Come on in.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. You can follow us on Twitter and YouTube for exclusive content. Right now, $1.09 trillion market cap. The market is flat. Bitcoin, 26,000, slightly over, 1649 and change for Ethereum. Tether market cap is 82.8 billion plus right now. XRP number 5 spot is at 52 cents. We're up 0.8% on the 24-hour and 3.7 on the 7-day. Let's get started right here. It's I Trust Capital. Buy and sell crypto, gold, and silver with your IRA, ladies and gentlemen. It is the best crypto IRA on the planet, bar none. If you don't believe me, click the link underneath. You can transfer a 401k, 403b, 457. You got so much available to you in your back office. You can buy and sell. These things are amazing, these products. Make sure you click the link and check out my sponsor for that. Don't mess around. Let's take a look at this very quickly here. If SWIFT doesn't get their act together, they may disappear like Kodak in the 80s.
But it's not true that SWIFT is really used as to... SWIFT never closed the country. So you could think of that, but they're closing sanctioned banks. So they're preventing sanctioned institutions to use the network. Like anybody, like any banks cannot do business, or any corporates cannot do business with a sanctioned entity.
So it's more like you turned off a specific node.
Yes.
You didn't actually turn off, let's say, a geographic cluster.
Yeah, the whole country.
Yep.
So that's important to make a difference. But will CBDC has an impact on SWIFT as it exists today? Yes, it will. That's one of the reasons why I left SWIFT, by the way, because I think that if they don't get their act together, they might be disappearing, a bit like Kodak in the 80s. So yes, they definitely...
Fighting words there.
So they...
Yes, it is. It is fighting words there. And you know what? It's also relevant to the tech world we're moving into. Take a look at this. The U.S. introduced a tax proposal that could kill DeFi as we know it. The USTreasury and the IRS just released proposed cryptocurrency regulations that may deem DeFi applications like Uniswap, 1inch, Curve, MetaMask, etc. to be brokers and be forced to implement KYC. The proposed rule would also apply to other digital assets such as non-fungible tokens, and they would apply to so-called decentralized finance platforms, is the way it's written. I tell you, I have said this multiple times, you can't stop the technology, but they can regulate it and tax it out of existence if they want to. I don't think that they want to. I think they just want to bring it inside of the framework of knowing who is using these platforms. Now, it is no coincidence we saw the BRICS summit just a few days ago, and then in that moment of time, we also see the central bank symposium in Jackson Hole. And who's there but Jerome Powell, all the other central bankers, and the ECB, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde. Listen to what she says about the theme of this conference: structural shifts in the global economy.
Hello to all of you, and I would like to share this magnificent panorama that is behind me. It is the setting of the Jackson Hole conference that takes place every year. It is a little bit like the Sintra of the West, except it's been around for longer. Many central bank governors, many academics, many experts in monetary policy and on the economy in general will be gathering for 2 days, and we will talk about the current situation, the major shifts that we are seeing, the major breaks, and how we can best respond with good policies that will actually help bring inflation back to 2%. This is the goal, this is the mission. We're not done yet. We are working hard, but we also have to compare notes and share our views with others so that we can have really the highest level of confidence that we are taking everything into account.
Well, there you have it. Structural shifts in the economy, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, the geopolitical landscape, too. I'm not going to play this whole clip, but I'm going to give you this again to set the stage here. We have a lot to hear, and I want you to hear the clip coming up after this. This is Sheikh Mohammed bin Salman from Saudi Arabia. The Middle East will be the Europe 2.0 in 5 years.
أنا أعتقد أن أوروبا الجديدة هي الشرق الأوسط.
Be the Middle East.
المملكة العربية السعودية في ال5 سنوات القادمة سوف تكون مختلفة تماما. البحرين سوف تكون مختلفة تماما. الكويت حتى قطر على خلافنا معاهم لديهم اقتصاد قوي سوف تكون مختلفة تماما بعد 5 سنوات.
And there you have it. And I tell you, he may be on to it, because I want you to hear this. This is probably one of the most interesting perspectives of BRICS and our future right here. I don't know the gentleman's name, but I know Crypto Insight UK shared it, and you should give him a follow if you haven't done it. But I want you to listen to this, and you need the entire clip. So I'm going to let it play here. Take a listen.
Okay. I don't want to be negative, or to sort of dampen the collective enthusiasm that people have these days about the alleged emerging multipolarity in the world, but I think we sort of need a bit of a reality check. What we're seeing with the BRICS project, with multiple countries applying for or are interested in joining BRICS, and the talk about creating an alternative currency for trade between BRICS members and so on. I think we need to realize that this is not a phenomenon that is ambushing the U.S. or the West. Many people, regular people, may not be aware of this, though it's not secret information by any means. Both the concept of BRICS and the term BRICS was launched by Goldman Sachs some 20 years ago. Goldman Sachs. There was a man named Jim O'Neill, who was the chief of Goldman Sachs back in 2001. And he coined the term BRICS and somewhat arbitrarily grouped Brazil, Russia, India, and China, and later South Africa together, because he predicted that, largely because of demographics, that these economies would grow and overtake the G7 in importance within the next 40 years. He believed that globalization could not sustainably continue to be American-dominated, because basically that was just too politically messy and too blatantly imperialistic. So Goldman Sachs created the idea of BRICS and marketed it as a brand, so much so that they even tried to trademark the word BRICS. So investment firms across the US and Europe, they bought the marketing, they bought the hype. And, BRICS investment funds were popping up all over the place. And eventually, even the governments of the BRICS nations actually formed a proper bloc. But this is a grouping that was willed into being by investors, by Goldman Sachs, by the private sector, and driven by a belief, which, if understood properly, was that global business had to free itself from Western and American centricity. The owners and controllers of global financialized capital outgrew the confines of patriotism. Company logos replaced national flags. So this project has been decades in the making. This shift has been planned for nearly half my lifetime. And it has been planned by the global financial elite. And now that same Jim O'Neill is calling for BRICS to create their own currency. Now, he's retired now, but he's still the voice of Goldman Sachs. So no one who matters is bothered about de-dollarization. This is what I've been saying for months now. Moving away from the dollar is part of the shift of the global economy.
Bingo. Being
undertaken by the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. The destabilization of Europe is a part of that shift as well. Over 130 billion euros of direct investment have exited Germany over just the past year, with only 10 billion coming in. Corporate bankruptcies in Germany are at record highs. The manufacturing heart of Europe is deindustrializing. And that's because the OCGFC have determined that Europe no longer holds significant promise in the future of the global economy. Meaning that they don't see sustainable profitability for themselves in Europe. And the cold, hard reality is they're not wrong. But the colder and harder reality is that they, not the governments of Europe, get to decide that that means that Europe and the people of the West are superfluous. Because your value is determined entirely by your utility to the owners and controllers of global financialized capital.
Bingo.
Consider this. Europe's demographic collapse means that your only real remedy, potentially, is to ramp up immigration. Well, depending upon from which country you're talking about, between 40% to 60% of non-European immigrants to the EU are unskilled. So that doesn't actually help you very much. But in a way, it represents, instead of a knowledge transfer, an ignorance transfer from the global south to Europe, removing unskilled, unqualified people from the economies that the OCGFC are focusing on developing, unburdening those economies of their own superfluous citizens. Meanwhile, of course, the presence of immigrants also allows native Europeans to direct their hostility over their own redundance against foreigners, and conflict ensues. The OCGFC see all of you as insignificant. And if all of Europe just turns into a giant cage fight between the white, black, and brown superfluous people, they're fine with that. That can turn a profit. Now, I should mention also that 10 years ago or so, BlackRock was promoting investment in other emerging economies outside of BRICS, namely Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and UAE. Now look at those countries now. I mean, Mohammed bin Salman didn't say that the Middle East was going to be the new Europe for nothing.
That's right.
He consults with Goldman Sachs. He consults with BlackRock. He consults with the owners and controllers of global financialized capital. He knows what the plans are, and then he makes his own plans accordingly. I mean, BlackRock controls a subsidiary of Aramco, so they're very close. So the point is, none of this is unsettling. None of this is surprising. None of this is catching the West or America off guard.
That's right.
And none of this represents the emergence of any real multipolarity in the world. It's a logical, capitalistically natural transition, largely influenced by demographic trends and by the fact that the West allowed the development of a parallel power structure in the private sector that inevitably surpassed state power and outgrew nationalism. This is why I don't really believe that de-dollarization is going to be meaningfully fought by the U.S., nor are we likely to see imperialistic wars and occupations of the BRICS nations by the United States.
That's right.
Private sector power has already conquered the U.S. Their own armed forces are more likely to be used to occupy their own country more than any other country, just to suppress their own populations who are increasingly dispossessed. I mean, think about the fact that the anti-Russian sanctions have actually benefited Russia financially. And not only Russia, India, China, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and others. I mean, FDI into Brazil, for example, is at its highest level since 2015. FDI into South Africa roughly doubled since the start of the Ukraine war. Ukraine has basically been a hinge, pivoting the global economy to the east and to the south. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this shift would not have happened without Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs and the owners and controllers of global financialized capital simply saw the writing on the wall and took action. They didn't cause the demographic collapse of Europe, but they saw it happening, and they were astute enough to anticipate the ramifications of that, and they came up with a plan B. And the B stands for BRICS.
I have to tell you, I don't know who that gentleman is, and I will ask Crypto Insight UK who it is, but I believe he's got his thumb on it, and so does this guy. Would you listen to this clip here of Greg Manarino here? Listen to what he lays down about the petrodollar in this agreement as well.
Today, I explained to you, or we spoke about how these oil-rich nations are now making alliances with the BRICS nations. Okay. A lot of you seem to be downplaying the significance of this. I did read through the comments. Do you understand that the US dollar is the world reserve currency because of one reason? That is the petrodollar. The United States has guaranteed to protect the oil of OPEC nations. And why would they do that? Well, so the petrodollar would exist. The petrodollar, because of the assurance to OPEC nations or oil-rich nations that the U.S. military would protect that oil. They have priced their oil in dollars. Okay, if that goes away, the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency goes away. And instead of the United States exporting its inflation to the rest of the world, you haven't seen anything yet with regard to inflation. The way of life that you've come to know here in the United States, which is quickly evaporating anyway, unless of course you're in the upper echelon of society, is going to change, and I mean change very, very rapidly. You have to look at the global stage. I am a macro guy, all right? I do focus on the small things too, but for the most part, it's the macro picture that I kind of focus on. The fact that these oil-rich nations are now joining the BRICS is a direct threat to the petrodollar system and the US dollar as the world reserve currency. This should be very, very obvious. And what is this going to lead to? Suffering, pain, death, and war. And more than likely a black swan event or some outlying thing. Who knows what they're going to do to us, but they have a lot more in store for us, again, as we go from crisis to crisis to crisis to crisis. That's how we've
always done it, and that is what we're talking about here. But I want to read to you this that I wrote with this tweet here. The world needs a solution. My thinking is this. If oil was the underpin for the US dollar after the gold standard, oil has utility. The kind of utility that has fueled the world's growth and supported the US dollar dominance to where it is today. That asset, oil, in and of itself, is only worth so much per barrel today. But what its compound effects have been for the US dollar dominance and the US as a global leader have been undeniable advantage. I look at XRP as the new oil, or water, to stick with the Ripple analogy, easing friction, carbon neutral, we know the rest of it. For the fourth industrial revolution, XRP has utility, and all the small medium enterprises, $17 trillion, all the financial institutions, all the banks and central banks, all the clearing houses can become what the combustion engine industrial revolution was for oil, which equals an inflection point for a flywheel effect when they begin using it at scale. Now, unless the price changes, I agree that there is not enough gold to satisfy the bill that's due today, but that's a whole other conversation. Plus, the Federal Reserve didn't like being handcuffed to gold, which is why the printer has been on ever since we abandoned the gold standard. I do believe, however, commodities like gold will play a massive confidence-ensuring role in the new financial system. But I think whatever side of this we all subscribe to, this thing will be revealed to everyone over the next couple of years if Saudi Arabia, in fact, pulls away from the exclusivity of the petrodollar agreement. Hanging in limbo and waiting to see how it shakes out is not a solution for the United States or the world. The United States, no matter who is in charge, is well aware that we are moving into the fourth industrial revolution, and it is digital and tokenized. And we're about to switch from a speculative market to a utility-driven market. What a time to be alive. You know, when I look at that, I do want to share this very quickly here. And it's BRICS member India ditches the US dollar, purchasing 1 billion with a B, 1 billion. Look at that, 100,000 million billion, 1 billion barrels of oil with rupees for the first time ever. It has already begun. The greatest financial paradigm shift in the history of mankind is well underway, and we are alive to watch it happen. Not financial advice from me or anyone else. It's just my digital perspectives. I'll catch all of you on the next one.